40 minutes. That's all she asked for. 40 minutes to save her grandmother from a lie that had already flown 14 hours to catch her in it. I said yes. I had no idea it would turn into 2 weeks, or that I'd fall for the woman I was only pretending to marry. I want you to picture the worst week of your dating life. Now stack it on top of the worst month of your dating life. Now put that on top of a canceled flight, a missing gate change, and a Wednesday afternoon that smelled like burnt coffee and jet fuel. That was me, standing at Gate C14, alone, again, and then a woman I had never met in my life grabbed my arm like she was drowning and I was the only piece of driftwood in the ocean, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "Please, just for 40 minutes, be my husband." I didn't say yes right away. I want that on the record. But I also didn't say no. This is the story of what happened next, and why, 3 months later, that same woman would be standing in my kitchen, apologizing for something I never even knew I was owed an apology for. Stick around. This one's got layers. My name doesn't matter much for this story, so I'll just call myself what she ended up calling me, Danny. I was 31 years old, flying home from my cousin's wedding in Denver, and if I'm being honest, I was not in a good headspace. I'd spent the entire wedding weekend being the plus none. Every table I sat at had a couple. Every toast mentioned somebody's soulmate. My aunt cornered me by the dessert table and asked, with real concern in her voice, if I was doing okay relationship-wise, in the exact tone you'd use to ask someone if they'd seen a doctor about a weird mole. I wasn't doing okay relationship-wise. 3 weeks earlier, a woman I'd been seeing for 4 months had told me she just didn't see forever with me over text while I was in a grocery store checkout line. I'd stood there holding a rotisserie chicken like an idiot while my chest caved in. So by the time I got to the airport for my flight home, I was tired in the specific way you get tired when you've spent an entire weekend performing fine for people who love you. I found a seat near my gate, put in my headphones without actually playing anything, and just stared at the floor. That's when the hand closed around my arm, not gently, not a tap. A full grip, fingers digging in through my jacket sleeve, like she was trying to anchor herself to me before a wave hit. I turned and there was this woman, mid-20s, maybe younger, wearing a dress that screamed wedding guest, the kind with the slightly too formal fabric and shoes, clearly picked for a dance floor and not an airport terminal. Her hair was half falling out of some kind of updo. Her mascara was a little smudged at the corner of one eye, like she'd been either crying or rubbing her face raw. "Please," she said. Just that word first. "Please. I'm sorry. Do I know you?" "No. No, you don't, and I am so sorry. I know this is insane, but I need 40 minutes. That's it. 40 minutes, and you never have to see me again." I remember laughing a little because it felt like the setup to something. 40 minutes of what? Of being my husband. I want you to understand the exact emotional whiplash of that sentence. 3 weeks removed from a breakup. A weekend of being reminded I was single. And now a stranger in a bridesmaid-adjacent dress was asking me to marry her, temporarily, in an airport. "My grandmother," she said, talking fast now, glancing over her shoulder at the escalator behind her like it might spit out a dragon at any second. "She's landing right now. She flew in from Manila. She is 81 years old, she has a heart condition, and she has spent 4 years, asking me when I'm going to stop wasting time and get married." I told her I got married 6 months ago. Small ceremony, she wasn't invited because of her health. I said we'd bring him to meet her eventually. "You told your grandmother you got married." I panicked. She kept asking, and I was tired of the pity, and I said the first thing that came into my head, and now she is here. She flew 14 hours to finally meet my husband because she thinks she doesn't have much time left. And I do not have a husband, Danny. I never told you my name. She blinked, looked down. My boarding pass was sticking half out of my jacket pocket. "Okay, fine." I panicked and I read your boarding pass. "Danny, please, I will never ask you for anything again in my life. I will Venmo you. I will name a child after you. 40 minutes. Here's the part I still can't fully explain, even now. I said yes. Maybe it was because I'd spent a whole weekend feeling invisible and unwanted, and here was someone who needed me so badly. Her hands were shaking. Maybe it was because I had nothing waiting for me at home except an empty apartment and a fridge with expired hummus in it. Maybe I just wanted, for 40 minutes, to matter to somebody. "Okay," I said. What's your name? Mina, she said, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath for 20 minutes. Mina Fernandez. And you're… Okay, quick, what do you do for a living? Because she's going to ask. I'm an architect. Perfect. She'll love that. She thinks doctors and engineers are the only real jobs. Architect is close enough. Okay, how did we meet? Mina. What? Breathe. I've got this. And God help me, in that moment I actually meant it. We had 90 seconds before her grandmother's flight was supposed to land, and Mina used every one of them narrating our fake life together, like she was cramming for an exam. We met at a coffee shop. You spilled your coffee on me. Very meet cute. She loves meet cutes. We dated for a year before getting married. The wedding was small because of my work schedule. I'm in oncology nursing, by the way, that part's real. You have a sister named… Okay, do you have a sister? I have a brother. Fine, you have a brother. Keep the brother. We live in Austin. No wait, she knows I live in Chicago. We live in Chicago. You proposed at the Lincoln Park Zoo near the flamingos because I told her that 4 years ago as a joke about what I wanted, and she apparently remembered it and I forgot I said it. Mina. I've got it. She stared at me like I'd just told her I could fly. I've got it, I said again. Coffee shop, 1 year, small wedding, flamingos, Chicago, oncology nurse. I'm an architect, brother not sister. I'm good with details. Just follow my lead if I improvise, okay? Married couples don't recite facts at each other. They just exist together. I don't know where that confidence came from. I think some dormant, unused part of me, the part that used to do improv in college, the part that hadn't gotten to perform anything except functional employee and tolerable nephew in years, just woke up and said, finally something interesting. Her grandmother came off that escalator like a queen doing inspection. Small woman, maybe 5 foot nothing, wrapped in a cardigan despite the Texas heat outside, moving slow but with absolute purpose, scanning the crowd with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Lola, Mina called out, and I watched her transform in real time, the panic dropping off her face like a mask, replaced by this bright, warm, practiced joy. She ran to her grandmother and hugged her like she meant it, and I realized, watching them, that the joy was real, only the reason for it was fake. Then her grandmother's eyes slid past Mina's shoulder and landed on me. And this, Mina said, turning, grabbing my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world, is Danny, my husband. I stepped forward and did the only thing I could think to do. I leaned in and kissed her grandmother's cheek, the way I'd seen my own uncles greet elders at family functions, respectful, warm. It's so good to finally meet you, I said. Mina talks about you constantly. Her grandmother's whole face changed, softened. She does? Every week, I said, which was a total lie, obviously, since I'd known this woman for 4 minutes. She said you make the best adobo in Quezon City and that no restaurant has ever come close. I have no idea where that came from. I'd overheard someone at the gate mention adobo 20 minutes earlier while ordering food. It was a shot in the dark, her grandmother beamed. She told you about my adobo? Lola, of course I did, Mina said, and squeezed my hand so hard I nearly winced. For the next 30-some minutes, we walked her grandmother, whose name I learned was Lola Corazon, though Lola just means grandmother in Tagalog, and everyone called her that, to baggage claim, and I performed the single greatest role of my life. I asked about her flight. I carried her bag before she could protest. I let her pinch my cheek and tell me I was too thin. You don't feed him. Mina? I laughed at jokes I didn't fully understand. I put my arm around Mina's waist at one point without even thinking about it, just because it felt like the natural physical grammar of the lie we were telling, and I felt her stiffen for half a second before she leaned into it. At one point, waiting for the bags, Lola Corazon took my hand in both of hers, her skin thin and warm and papery, and looked at me with this searching, serious expression. You take care of her, she said. Not a question, an instruction. I do, I said, and something about saying it out loud, even as a lie, made my throat tight. I will. She works too hard. She forgets to eat. She thinks if she stops moving for 1 second, something bad will happen to someone she loves. Lola Corazon glanced at Mina, who was pretending to be very interested in the baggage carousel. You remind her to rest, okay? I promise, I said, and I watched Mina's jaw tighten like she was fighting back tears. The bags came. We got Lola Corazon into a cab that Mina had arranged for her to go to Mina's apartment. where apparently this detail nearly gave me whiplash. Mina had spent the last 3 days staging the place to look like a we live here together household. 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom. A men's jacket, borrowed from a coworker, hung by the door. A framed photo on the shelf of Mina at a wedding, cropped so it looked like a couple's photo, some poor groomsman's arm just visible enough to suggest a partner without showing a face. "You did all that for a lie you were going to end after 40 minutes?" I asked, once the cab pulled away and it was just the two of us standing on the curb. Mina's bright, performed smile finally cracked. She pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. "She's not going back to Manila for 2 weeks," she said, voice muffled. I didn't think that far ahead. I thought, get her through the airport, prove the husband exists, buy some time, figure out a story later. I didn't think about the fact that she's staying with me. In my apartment, with the toothbrushes. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I know. You need a husband for 2 weeks, not 40 minutes. She looked up at me, mascara fully wrecked now, and there was something so raw and exhausted in her face that whatever irritation I might have felt evaporated completely. "I can't ask you that," she said. "I can't ask you to do this again. I already feel sick about the last 40 minutes. Here's the thing you have to understand about where my head was at. I had just spent 40 minutes being someone's husband, and it was the first time in 3 weeks I hadn't felt like a discarded piece of furniture. Lola Corazon had looked at me like I mattered. Mina had looked at me, even in the middle of a panicked lie, like I was steady, like I was someone she could lean her whole weight against. I missed being needed. That's the honest, slightly pathetic truth of it. "Buy me a coffee," I said. "Tell me the whole story, then I'll decide." We sat in an airport cafe that smelled like burnt espresso, and Mina told me everything. She was an oncology nurse, 28 years old, and her grandmother had raised her for most of her childhood after Mina's parents split, and both, in different ways, checked out. Lola Corazon wasn't just her grandmother, she was her mother, her anchor, the person who taught her that love means showing up even when it costs you something. 4 years ago, Lola Corazon had a heart attack. Survived it, but it scared everyone. Ever since, every phone call ended with some version of, "I want to see you settled before I go." Every visit came with an inventory of Mina's unmarried status, like it was a wound that needed dressing. "I got tired of disappointing her," Mina said, turning her coffee cup in slow circles. Every year it was still no boyfriend. Every year I'd say something about being busy with work, and she'd get this look, not angry, just sad, like I was letting something slip away. And 6 months ago she called and she sounded so weak, and I panicked. I said I got married. I don't even know why I said it. I think I wanted just once to make her happy on the phone instead of worried, and then she decided to fly here. She decided to fly here. Mina laughed, but it wasn't really a laugh. 81 years old, bad heart, 14-hour flight, because she wanted to meet the man who made her granddaughter happy before. She stopped herself. Mina nodded, not trusting her voice. I sat with that for a second. The weight of it. This wasn't a prank, or a bit, or a Hallmark movie meet-cute setup, though God knows it would look like one from the outside. This was a woman trying to give her dying grandmother one piece of peace before it was too late, using the only tool she had, which happened to be a stranger's kindness in an airport terminal. "Okay," I said. "Okay what?" 2 weeks. I'll be your husband for 2 weeks. Mina stared at me like I'd offered her a kidney. "Danny, I can't let you rearrange your entire life." 4. You're not rearranging my life. My life currently is an empty apartment, a job I do from home, and a dating history so bad my aunt tried to stage an intervention at a wedding this weekend. I shrugged. I've got nothing but time and apparently a talent for improvised marriage. Let's do this properly. Ground rules, backstory, the whole thing. She laughed, a real one this time, wet-eyed but real, and something in my chest loosened at the sound of it. "Who even are you?" she said. "Currently, your husband. Ask me anything. I won't walk you through every day of it, but I'll give you the shape of it. Because the shape is where the story actually lives. The first few days were logistics." I moved a duffel bag of clothes into Mina's apartment's guest room, which she introduced to Lola Corazon as the office we're converting whenever she came by. Corazon was staying with Mina's cousin, nearby, thankfully, visiting most days rather than living in the apartment full-time, which made the whole thing marginally more sustainable. We built out our fake history in more detail, laughing way harder than the situation warranted over inventing the story of our first fight. You left the dishes in the sink for 4 days, Danny, and our first vacation. We settled on a lie about Puerto Rico, since I'd actually been there once and could speak to it convincingly. What surprised me was how little of it felt like performance after the first few days. We'd go to dinner with Lola Corazon 4 times a week, and somewhere in the second week I stopped bracing for the next lie I'd have to tell and started just enjoying myself. Mina was sharp and funny in a way that snuck up on you, deadpan, until suddenly she wasn't. And she had this habit of narrating her grandmother's inside jokes to me, under her breath so I wouldn't be lost, her mouth close to my ear, her hand resting on my arm like it belonged there. I noticed the way she touched me changed over the 2 weeks. At the airport, it had been urgent, functional, grabbing to convince. By the second week, it had softened into something that looked less like performance and more like habit. A hand on my back guiding me through a doorway. Fingers laced with mine walking to the car when nobody was even watching. I noticed because I found myself doing the same thing. Reaching for her hand before I'd even decided to. Remembering, unprompted, that she took her coffee with oat milk and exactly 1 sugar. Texting her on days we didn't have a Lola Corazon dinner scheduled, just to ask how her shift went. There was a night in the second week. Lola Corazon had gone to bed early at the cousin's place, and Mina and I ended up back at the apartment eating cold pad thai out of the container, sitting on the kitchen floor because neither of us could be bothered to get up to the table. When she looked at me and said, "This is insane, right? Tell me this is insane." "It's extremely insane," I agreed. "I hired a stranger to be my husband, and now I look forward to seeing him more than I've looked forward to seeing anyone in years. You didn't hire me. I'm doing this for free, which honestly makes it worse." She laughed, and then she got quiet, staring at the noodles like they held the answer to something. "I have to tell you something, and I need you to not make it weird." "I make everything weird. Low bar. Go ahead. When you kissed my grandmother's cheek at the airport, that first 30 seconds, before I even really knew if this would work, I remember thinking, I picked well. Not I got lucky. Not this stranger is doing me a favor. I thought, I picked well, like I'd actually chosen you for something real. And that scared the hell out of me because I built an entire relationship out of a lie, and some part of my brain is treating it like it's not a lie at all. I didn't say anything for a second, just sat with it. I've been doing the same thing, I admitted. Every time I remember this is temporary, it lands like a small, stupid disappointment, which is insane, because I met you 17 days ago because you grabbed my arm and asked me to lie to your dying grandmother. Okay, when you say it like that, it sounds worse. It is worse when you say it like that. We both laughed too hard, the kind of laughing that's really about releasing something else. And then it went quiet, and she was looking at me, and I was looking at her, and the space between us on that kitchen floor got very small, very fast. We didn't kiss that night. I want to be honest about that because I think if we had, it would have felt like it belonged to the lie instead of to us. Instead, she rested her head on my shoulder, and we sat there in comfortable silence until the pad thai went cold enough to be inedible. And I walked her to her room, and I went to my duffel bag in the guest room, and I lay awake for a long time thinking about a stranger's grip on my arm and how it had, somehow, turned into the realest thing in my life. Every fake relationship story needs a moment where it almost falls apart. And ours came on day 11, at a dinner with Lola Corazon, and, unfortunately, Mina's actual mother, who flew in unannounced once she heard her mother-in-law adjacent situation, sensing an opportunity to reinsert herself into a family narrative she'd mostly opted out of years ago. Mina's mother did not know about the fake marriage. Mina's mother also happened to recognize me, vaguely, from a photo on my actual social media, from an actual mutual friend's actual engagement party 8 months earlier, where I had, in fact, been there with the ex-girlfriend who dumped me over text in a grocery store line. "Wait," Mina's mother said, over appetizers, squinting at me. "Weren't you with? What was her name? At Priya's engagement party? The girl in the green dress?" The table went very still. I felt Mina's hand find mine under the table and grip it, hard, the exact same grip from the airport, and I understood in that instant that this was the moment the whole structure could collapse. "That was my ex," I said, keeping my voice level, deciding in real time to lean into the truth rather than dig deeper into the lie. We broke up a few months before Mina and I got serious. Small world though, Priya's actually a mutual friend of ours too. It wasn't exactly a lie. Priya was, coincidentally, someone Mina also vaguely knew through the hospital, a fact I'd learned 2 nights earlier during our increasingly elaborate backstory building sessions. The universe, for once, had handed us a thread we could actually pull instead of one that would unravel everything. Mina's mother looked, for a moment, like she might say something else, might push, might remember something that didn't add up. But Lola Corazon, sharper than anyone gave her credit for, cut in. "Enough interrogating him," she said, swatting a hand at her daughter-in-law. "Let the boy eat. You've been staring at him since we sat down." The moment passed. But afterward, in the parking garage, Mina grabbed my sleeve. For the third time in this story, always the sleeve, always that same desperate grip, and said, "That was too close." "It was," I agreed. "I don't want to lie to my mother, too. I don't want this to spiral into more people. I think—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I think I need to tell my grandmother the truth before this gets so big it destroys something." "Destroys what?" "Use," she said, and then flinched, like the word had surprised her on the way out. "I mean, whatever this is. What we built. I don't want it to be built on a foundation that's going to collapse the second someone asks one more question we didn't prepare an answer for." I remember standing there in that parking garage, fluorescent lights humming, and feeling something crystallize in my chest. "Then let's tell her something true instead." "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we stopped pretending we started as a marriage and told her the truth about how we actually started? Not the coffee shop story, the real one, the airport, the favor, all of it. Because Mina, the last 2 weeks weren't fake. I don't know what to call what's happening between us, but it isn't a lie anymore. It hasn't been a lie for a while." She stared at me for a long moment, eyes shining under the ugly garage lighting. "You'd really tell her the truth? That we're not actually married? After everything?" "I'd rather tell your grandmother a true, weird, complicated story about how her granddaughter accidentally fell for a stranger who agreed to help her than keep building a lie neither of us can live inside forever." We told her 3 days later, the night before her flight home. Mina held her grandmother's hands across the kitchen table and told her everything. The panic, the lie about being married, the airport, my agreeing to help, the 2 weeks, all of it. I sat beside her the whole time, not saying much, just present, the way I'd learned to be present for her over those 2 weeks. I watched Lola Corazon's face while Mina talked, bracing for anger or hurt, or the kind of disappointed silence that's worse than either. Instead, what I saw was something closer to quiet amusement, and then, slowly, something like recognition. When Mina finished, voice cracking on the apology at the end, "I'm sorry, Lola. I'm so sorry I lied to you." Her grandmother was quiet for a long moment, then she said, "You think I did not know?" Mina blinked. "What?" "Anak, I raised you. I know your face when you're lying. Since you were 6 years old and told me the neighbor's dog ate your homework when you didn't even have a dog neighbor." Lola Corazon reached across the table and patted Mina's cheek, the same gesture she'd have made to a much younger version of her granddaughter. "I knew, by the second dinner, that you two were not married 6 months. Married people do not look at each other like it is the first time, every single time. You looked at him like it was the first time, every time. You knew, and you let us keep going?" "I let you keep going," Lola Corazon said, "because I have not seen you look at anyone like that in years. Not since before your father left. You stopped letting yourself want things, because wanting things means they can be taken away. I did not care if the marriage was real. I cared whether the way you looked at him was real. And Anak, it was." Mina was crying now, the good kind of crying, and Lola Corazon turned her sharp, warm eyes on me. "And you," she said, "you did not have to keep coming back after the airport. 40 minutes, that is what she asked for. You gave 2 weeks of your life to a stranger's family, and you did not ask for anything in return. I know men. Most men would want something for a favor like that. What did you want?" I thought about it, really thought, because it deserved a real answer. At first, honestly, I wanted to feel needed, I said. I'd had a bad month. Somebody had just told me I wasn't worth building a future with, and 40 minutes into pretending to be Mina's husband, I felt more wanted than I had in weeks. That's the selfish, true answer. I glanced at Mina, but somewhere in the 2 weeks, it stopped being about what I wanted to feel and started being about who I wanted to be around. I don't need anything from this anymore except more of it. Lola Corazon smiled, a real deep, satisfied smile, and folded her hands on the table like a queen closing court. Good, she said. Now, since you are not actually married, you will do it properly. And I expect an invitation. I am not flying 14 hours again for anything less than a real wedding. So that brings us to the kitchen I mentioned at the start. My kitchen? Well, our kitchen, if I'm allowed to say that yet. Mina stood there 3 months after that dinner, in real non-wedding guest clothes this time, and said the thing I promised you at the beginning of this video. She apologized for something I never knew I was owed an apology for. I used you, she said, that first day. I saw a stranger and I saw a solution to my problem, and I grabbed you like you were an object I needed, not a person. I never even asked if you had somewhere to be, if you had a bad week already, if you had anything going on that made this an unfair thing to ask. I just took what I needed. I'm sorry it took me 3 months to actually say that out loud instead of just being grateful. You said yes. I want to tell you what I told her, because I think it's the actual ending of this whole story, the reason I'm making this video at all. You didn't just take something from me at that airport, I said. You gave me something too, even if you didn't mean to. You gave me 40 minutes where I mattered to someone on a day I felt like I mattered to no one. Everything after that, the 2 weeks, your grandmother. That's just what happened when two people who both needed to be needed found each other by accident in the worst possible way, at the worst possible gate, in the worst possible week. She laughed, wet-eyed again, in the exact way she had that night in the kitchen with the cold pad thai. So we're good? She asked. Mina, you didn't just grab my arm in an airport. I reached out and took her hand, no urgency this time. No panic, just the same easy grip we'd built over months of choosing each other, again and again past the point where either of us had to. You grabbed the rest of my life. I'd let you do it again in a heartbeat. Lola Corazon, by the way, is already planning the wedding. She has opinions about the flowers. She has opinions about the flamingos, too. Apparently, if we're doing this for real, the joke has to become the truth, and there will, in fact, be a proposal at the Lincoln Park Zoo. Some lies, it turns out, are just the truth arriving a little early, dressed up as something else, waiting for you to be brave enough to let them become real. End.